Alright, for this explainer, we're diving into a source that tells a creation story unlike any you've probably heard before. We're talking cosmic management, a moon built from scratch, and not one but multiple competing origins for humanity. It's a story that pretty much challenges everything.
So, let's just start with this question. What if the creation stories we all know are really just the first chapter of a much bigger, much stranger cosmic drama? Well, the text we're digging into today says that's exactly the case, and it takes us right back to the very beginning.
So at the heart of the story is a single greatest creator, who just sort of came into being in the middle of this huge chaotic field of energy. But to bring any kind of order to all that chaos, the creator couldn't go it alone. Kind of like the founder of a huge company. You have the vision, but you need a team to actually build the thing. So to get this grand project off the ground, the creator's very first move was to build a team. And we're not talking about just any helpers. These were seriously powerful beings, designed to manage entire chunks of the cosmos. So, how do you even make a god? Well, the source describes this incredible process. The creator would use its own conscious energy to squeeze a whole region of the universe together, kind of like firing soft clay in a super hot kiln until it becomes a solid, stable brick. The end result? A conscious cluster of energy, a god, way more powerful than any star you can see in the sky. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. You've got this brand new divine workforce, right? But as soon as it was created, a massive conflict popped up right at its core, and that split basically set the stage for everything that was about to happen.
Okay, so according to this specific text, our little corner of the universe is governed by two main gods, and it names them as Jesus and Satan. But the source doesn't just paint them as enemies. It sees them as this essential unity of opposites, the two fundamental poles of all existence. Light and dark, good and evil, the whole deal.
So the universe is now orderly, but there's a big problem. It's cold, and it's empty, it's lonely. So the gods go back to the greatest creator and basically petition for more life to fill up the void. This leads to the creation of a whole new class of beings, one step down from the gods, the angels. And this is where that core conflict just blows up. The second the angels are created, they immediately split into two factions. The ones who sided with Jesus became the super celestials. And then, in the specific language of this source, the ones who followed Satan are called Buddhas. This huge split becomes the engine that drives the rest of the story. So, let's see how this plays out. About 4.5 billion years ago, the faction aligned with Jesus, the super celestials. They decide to start a massive construction project to show what they can do. Their goal? To build our entire solar system. So after creating animals on Earth, the super celestials hit a snag. For life to really flourish, it needs tides, wind, and rain. And their solution was, well, ambitious. They decided to just build a moon. The source lays out this incredible process you see here. First, they build huge smelting plants on Earth. Then they make flying saucers to act as transport ships. They ferry all these refined metals up to a kind of orbital space station, and piece by piece, they assemble the gigantic, hollow, reflective sphere we see in the sky. Absolutely wild.
And according to this text, the evidence of all this cosmic engineering is still with us. Those UFOs people see, they're not from another galaxy. They're celestial vehicles coming out of a base inside the moon. And the whole mystery of the Bermuda Triangle? Supposedly, it's just the location of an underwater celestial outpost, kind of like a temporary hotel.
Okay, now we finally get to us, humanity. And in this version of the story, our origin is not a single simple event. It's a whole series of competing creations, divine interventions, and experiments, all driven by that cosmic rivalry.
So while the super celestials were busy building a beautiful world, Satan's faction, the Buddhas, came down to Earth to basically wreck the place. They created pests like flies and mosquitoes, and then carnivores, and for their big, destructive masterpiece, they took the form of dinosaurs and just rampaged all over the planet. So after a plague eventually wiped out the dinosaurs, the greatest creator sent down a blueprint for a new life form, humans. According to the text, Jesus' faction started the manufacturing process, but, well, it took a couple of tries to get it right. As you see here, their first attempts led to monkeys, then ape men. But eventually they nailed it, and started creating humans in what the source calls distinct batches for different continents, including the peoples of Africa, the Americas, and Europe. But here is a really crucial point. This wasn't the only time humans were created. The source says that the peoples of the Middle East have a totally separate origin, created by a different god in the Garden of Eden.
And it suggests this might explain some biblical oddities, like who Cain was so afraid of finding him after he was exiled. Well, apparently there were other people around.
So that covers a few groups, but this source presents yet another origin story for the peoples of East and Southeast Asia. It starts with this famous cultural saying about being descendants of the dragon, and then it gives it a shockingly literal meaning.
And the text is really clear on this point. This is not a metaphor. It's not a myth. It's claiming a direct biological link between the people of this region and the ancient beings we call dinosaurs. So, the explanation goes like this. A pair of dinosaurs managed to survive that plague by hiding out deep in the ocean. Millions of years later, they came back to land, took on human form, and began to reproduce. The text even argues that this is why concepts from Taoism and Buddhism resonate so deeply there. It's a subconscious, inherited genetic memory of their pre-human existence.
So, with all these competing creations and divine meddling, things on Earth eventually got out of hand. Humans became corrupt and arrogant. And in response, the greatest creator had to step in and enforce multiple resets on the entire planet.
The source describes this very clear, cyclical pattern. A dominant life form shows up, gets too big for its britches, and threatens the cosmic order, which forces the greatest creator to intervene. We saw it with the plague that killed the dinosaurs 130 million years ago. Then again with the destruction of early civilizations like Atlantis. And then more recently with the Great Flood about 4,700 years ago, which was designed to just wipe the slate clean.
What's really interesting, though, is that this text claims the Great Flood wasn't a total do-over with just one family surviving. It argues there were survivors in many regions of the world, and it points to other historical records, like China's story of Yu the Great's flood control, as parallel evidence of a global but not total catastrophe.
So, to quickly recap the biggest ideas from this source. First, the universe is run by a cosmic hierarchy. Second, this fundamental duality, this conflict between two opposing sides, is what drives all of history. Third, humanity doesn't have one origin story, it has several. And finally, our history is just one big, repeating cycle of creation and divine resets. And this whole narrative really leaves us with a final thought to chew on. Whether you take it literally, or as one big metaphor, it offers a fascinating way to look at the world. It suggests that the dualities we see everywhere, conflict and harmony, creation and destruction, aren't just human problems, but maybe, just maybe, they're echoes of a cosmic struggle that's written into the very fabric of our existence.